I keep running out of brain power trying to articulate how stupid this is. This is a whole adult who sat down, put his fingers to a keyboard, and just vomited. I mean, that's really what this is. That's it. It's so... But again, we would just be different. Because it's saying the oceans would stagnate and die if the moon were smaller right this second, with all of the life that's already here. The idea behind this is that the life would have evolved differently based on the available tide. How does he not understand this? I regret painting a smile on my face because I am decidedly unhappy with this.
What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken to sell us secure, we're worthy as we are.
Welcome, cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. Let's go ahead and get into the next chapter in this already awful book by Hanegraaff. But first, let's see what some of you had to say on the previous video. The pinned comment today comes from Ark Chapman, who writes, "Hang on, Hank. As a member of a cannibal cult, don't you think you should be wary of using cannibalism to prove Peking Man was dinner and not a god?" So thank you, Chapman, for that. Definitely was worthy of the pen. Jeff Engel lets us know that nut-picking is an argumentative tactic in which one picks out as representatives of an opposing position, specifically some of the worst and or fringe representatives of that position, mocks or demolishes them, and then declares victory over the opposing position generally. It's a close cousin to straw manning, just with a straw man that actually does exist, but not as a genuinely good or typical example of the actual, and for some reason it cuts off, I think probably of the actual argument or the actual opposing position. Thank you for that, Jeff. I'm happy to employ nut picking in some of the upcoming chapters. Nocturnal Lux writes, "I think they rely on Darwin so much, also due to projecting. Being very driven to take authority as the basis against which to measure everything, they assume everyone does the same and that discrediting the source, so to speak, will have a domino effect on the whole of evolution. To them, it'd be like an atheist discrediting the Bible. It'd be much more powerful than debunking current apologetics, although by now the two do tend to blend. Darwin's work is the counter to the Bible, so they expect the same kind of reverence and worshipful attitude. They believe everything has basically already been revealed and project this on us as well." So that is something that I bring up occasionally, this idea that they think we are stuck on this one authority and that Darwin is our authority, and anytime Darwin can be shown to be imperfect or that his ideas were incorrect, that somehow throws out the entirety of evolutionary biology. For them, if you have a part of the Bible that is not correct, then a lot of them will say the entire thing can be thrown out too. The whole point is that the Bible is either inspired by God or, depending on who you ask, penned by God himself. It's a fringe belief, I guess nut-picking there, but there are some people that do believe that. Generally, the idea is that it's inspired by God, so therefore there can be no errors. If there's one error, it means the whole thing can be thrown out. This is why they think pointing out something like Nebraska Man somehow means the entire hominid chain can also be thrown out. If one of these is shown to be a problem, that means none of them are correct, or we should suspect all of them of being a problem too. And of course, that's just not how science works. One thing I like, though, is that you added that they believe everything has basically already been revealed and project this onto us as well. That's something I hadn't really considered. This idea that because for them, everything, as you said, has been revealed, then anything we present for evolution is the finality of it. We're not going to ever discover anything new. We're not going to dig up any new fossils. Sort of this idea that if it was there for us to find, we would have found it already. And since we haven't found it, we're never going to find it. Therefore, evolution is wrong. So I really appreciate that comment. Chapman writes, "A hypothesis being tested and coming out quote-unquote false is a good thing. It means that we can eliminate that when we're looking for what's correct or for useful models. It's okay to be wrong in your initial ideas. It's what allows us to learn more about the world. Knowing what is wrong is a vital part of knowing what is right. And I absolutely agree with that. That's something that we have to be comfortable with, this idea that our ideas can be wrong, and that's useful. It's useful for us to eliminate these ideas. It's kind of like if you do a drawing. What you draw is important, but so is what you erase. When you make mistakes, you need to erase them and refine what you've drawn. Sometimes when you make an erasure, you can use it to highlight something, like an eye or a liquid that you're drawing. Using that eraser actually adds to it instead of taking away. So I think that's how we can sort of think about this, that the closer we get to producing a good picture, the more we're going to have to draw and the more we're going to have to erase. Jeff Engel writes, I'd actually welcome Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon as extremely distant cousins. I suspect we'd have a really hard time communicating, but finding out just how hard that is and what it would take would be a fantastic advance in anthropology. And I just like people anyway. I think absolutely. And for evolutionary psychology as well, I would want to know what we do have in common with them. What would they want to talk about? Great Caesar's Ghostwriter writes, the flip side of the we can't trust science, it's always changing record is God never changes. Some people seem to want that. I definitely agree. They bring this up a lot when they talk about morality, this idea that morals are stuck. They're set in stone. If this is wrong, it's always wrong. It's always wrong no matter what. It's sort of like the idea of killing another person. Is killing another person wrong? Generally, sure. But if I'm killing somebody to stop them from killing several other people, or even just killing one other person, we would see that as not the same as premeditated murder, for example. We would see that as probably a morally good act. If I am capable of stopping a person from harming others, from ending their lives, if I'm capable of doing that and I do nothing, we would consider my inaction to be immoral. Why didn't this person step in? Why didn't they help out? So this idea that morals are the same no matter what is a bit bizarre. Ark Chapman brings up something that I've only heard from Matt Dillahunty. This idea that if we've descended from Europeans, then why are there still Europeans? Checkmate, says American creationists. Jason Henderson writes, yeah, you know who figured out Nebraska Man was a pig's tooth? Here's a hint, it wasn't creationists. It was biologists, or evolutionists, as they like to be called. 100%. And it's okay to follow that science, right? When the scientists or evolutionists find out that it's actually a pig's tooth, we can listen to them. But then when they say some other sample is another hominid that is related to us, oh, now we can't trust them. So they really like to pick and choose when they want to follow the science and when they don't want to follow the science. There was a time when I was just really frustrated with this conversation, and it was a conversation with somebody who was very evangelical, and they were talking about how they can just trust God and God this, and science can't tell us anything. Not just that science doesn't tell us everything, it's that science doesn't tell us anything. Really, we have to rely on God. Science is always changing and it's unreliable, etc. So I said, just pray next time that you need your gas refilled. See what happens. I mean, just pray to God's just going to keep your car running, even without any fuel in it. That's really the idea, isn't it? We can't trust anything that's remotely related to science. It's always changing. You know, we come up with different fuel types. We come up with different engines. Certainly, that's science changing and therefore unreliable. So just pray next time you run out of gas. That'll keep it going. God's the reliable one, right? I'm not sure where I'm going to cut this off. Is it Craig Orovillupo? Is it Craigoro Villupo? Anyway, Craig writes, citing Piltdown Man and Nebraska Man as evolution defeaters, ad hominem fallacy. This is worse than Turek and Geisler. At least they tried to build an argument. As poorly as they did, at least they tried. Okay, almost until the end where they dropped the ball with the full precept. This book instead is so bold in his lies. They aren't coated in dress. They are there naked for all to see. It shows it's meant to be read in an echo chamber, not in an environment with pushback. I mean, credit to the T&G book. You have to educate yourself a bit to rebut it, but this one instead is shattered by a simple Google search. It won't survive the basic curiosity of anyone asking himself, is this really true? Or even someone just wanting more info. They would stumble on the truth eventually. Therefore, my conclusion is this book is meant for a cult, where information is controlled and where personality added to confidence are more important than being correct. Now let's hear the usual accusation and why they desperately need your money. Atheism atheist evolutionists conspire to get the government funds so they can kill babies after sexualizing all day long, and somehow the age of the earth have a greater part in it being possible, because evil and world scary. Thank you so much, Craig. You've absolutely articulated my problem with this book. I started realizing this book is actually worse than Frank and Norm's book, but I couldn't really put my finger on why, and you've really summed it up very well. Also, I agree, this idea about the age of the earth is somehow relevant to us evil atheists, something government conspiracy, doesn't really make sense. It reminds me a lot of the flat earthers, how they think that the government or the powers that be want us to believe in a globe because what would be the purpose? What would be the purpose of saying the sun is distant when the sun was really here inside the firmament, inside the dome of our flat earth enclosure? What would be the purpose of that lie? What would be the purpose of the idea of the moon if the moon is really just a projection on the inside of the dome, as some flat earthers believe? Why would they say otherwise? What would be the point? A lot of them will just say because it discredits the Bible, or because the Bible says, or because the Torah says, or in some cases because the Quran says the earth is flat, so if we say it's a globe, that disproves what it says in this religious text, but they don't usually just jump to that. It's really difficult to get them to articulate it, and anytime I really have been successful with meeting a flat earther and getting them to that level, they just say that I'm brainwashed, and that's kind of it. So it's been really difficult to try to get them to explain exactly how. I'm trying to think of anything about the age of the earth beyond, since Satan is the father of lies, he's just lying to you to get you to believe him. That's the only thing that I can remember about it. We will end with Shane. As you alluded to, it really seems like this guy had read some creationist books and decided to crib them and write his own. Plot twist. Other creationists hate him for ripping them off. I wouldn't be surprised. This guy is it worse than Frank and Norm? Is he doing this more frequently? I think he might be. Because there were times when Frank and Norm cited themselves, usually Norm's previously published stuff, or they also cited personal conversations with other other apologists. And I think that having a conversation and then turning that into something that you have to write about is probably going to require more thought than just taking something straight from somebody else's book and rewriting it in such a way that it's technically not plagiarism, but otherwise it's quoted from quoting from quote. Yeah, this is worse than some of the stuff my students turn in. Chapter 4 is titled Chance. I saw that they're going to mention the eye, the egg, and some third thing I forgot. I guess we'll get there when we get there. But what do you think they're going to bring up? For me, I'm guessing it'll have to do with irreducible complexity. This idea that we can't have a partial eye or a partial egg. But right away I'm just thinking monotremes. But right away I'm just thinking about marsupials. So I don't know. Let's go ahead and dig in. One of the primary dilemmas of evolutionary theory is that it forces scientists to conclude that the cosmos, in all of its complexity, was created by chance. Well, starting off strong. As biologist Jacques Monod, a winner of the prestigious Nobel Prize in what? Puts it, chance alone is at the source of every innovation, of all the creation in the biosphere. Pure chance, absolutely free but blind, is at the very root of the stupendous edifice of evolution. Let's see what they're saying here. This comes from an actual book as quoted in John Ankerberg and John Weldon, Darwin's Leap of Faith, Exposing the False Religion of Two Evolutions. You know, if it's John and John from They Might Be Giants, fantastic. John and John from whatever the hell this is, no thank you. As noted theologian R.C. Sproul explains, for the materialist, chance is the magic wand to make not only rabbits but entire universes appear out of nothing. That one I have heard. How many of you have heard that too? Sproul also warns that if chance exists in any size, shape, or form, God cannot exist. The two are mutually exclusive. If chance existed, it would destroy God's sovereignty. If God is not sovereign, he is not God. If he is not God, he simply is not. If chance is, God is not. If God is, chance is not. Wow. This, right out the gate. I mentioned that while we were reading the comments, didn't I? If one part of the Bible is wrong, then it's all wrong. If you haven't jumped into the lemon cult yet, get in on this, okay? Obviously, clearly prophetic. This also comes from the same book that was cited for the rabbit being pulled out of the magic hat, and so too the universe. So when I was a Christian, the way that I described this idea that God does not control everything, because I too believe that the Bible didn't say, or the Bible did say that we had free will, but upon actually reading it, it shows pretty clearly we don't have free will according to the Bible. But I've always explained it as this idea that God knows what's going to happen. That doesn't mean he makes it happen. For example, if I watch a movie and then I rewatch the movie, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know what's coming next. I know what the characters are going to say. But that doesn't mean that I made them do those things or that I made them say those things. This is still something that goes on for the characters. They're still making these decisions, but I just know what's coming up. Nothing is going to be a surprise for me because I've seen this before. Well, God hasn't seen us before in that same sense, but rather, since God exists in all space and all time, God already knows what we're going to do. It's not that he forces us to do anything, it's that he knows what we're going to do. Now, I would say that still allows for chance. Wouldn't you? I would say so. I mean, I haven't given it all that much thought, but I would say that that would still happen. I also had this idea that God was sort of like an engineer. He set everything up to work without his interference, because if God had to interfere constantly in our lives, we would be wholly dependent on him, and therefore that would interrupt our free will as well. So I always thought that God had set things up to just function without his constant, touching and manipulation. And in that sense, too, chance could exist. Things that maybe weren't predicted. Remember, God is not making these decisions for us. He just knows that they're going to happen because he happens to exist in all time. That doesn't mean that God can't be surprised. After all, that's what we see with the flood. That's why he created the flood, because people surprised him. They acted in such a way that he didn't expect. He regretted creating them, and he kills all living things on the planet, including animals and plants, because he's just done with everybody and wants a hard reset. I would say that would allow for chance, wouldn't it? Chance in this sense refers to what happens without cause. Oh, okay. And there's another footnote. Chance as an ontological entity does not exist. So when it is appealed to as an agency of cause, it is utterly impotent and meaningless. However, this sense of chance as a causal agency is what one gropes for in order to assert that the universes appear out of nothing by chance. On the other hand, chance can quite usefully refer to a formal mathematical probabilities, not at all signifying something that happens without a cause. In common parlance, when we say something has happened by chance, we don't mean that the event had no cause, but that the actual cause is unknown to us. Okay, so that's what is also being said here for the atheist, for the evolutionist, quote unquote, or for the person who just doesn't accept God. They're not saying that chance means it has no cause. They're saying that chance means it wasn't predicted. It's something that happened as a probability, for example, and that the cause is unknown to us. Even when the cause is known to us, there's still chance involved, like with the lottery, for example. So they're actually just creating a straw man. They're saying that this is what atheists believe, that chance is its own cause, that it's a causal agent to create out of nothingness, which nobody believes. So if you guys put straw man nonsense, then good predicting, good predicting. Thus, chance implies the absence of both a design and a designer. So again, this is their own made-up idea of what chance is based on them. I don't know, do you think he's intentionally misrepresenting what atheists say, or do you think that he's actually so stupid he doesn't know what atheists are actually saying? And so arrogant that he's going to tell everybody else what they are saying. Reflect for a moment on the absurdity of such a notion. Yeah, it is absurd. When you make something stupid and then you say it's stupid, well, yeah, it's because you made it stupid. Imagine suggesting that Christopher Wren had nothing whatsoever to do with the design of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Imagine asserting the majestic Messiah composed itself apart from Handel. Or imagine the Last Supper painted itself without Leonardo da Vinci. Child, oh good gracious. This is sort of a sidestep from what I was thinking about, but I guess he's going to start off with this idea that atheists are wrong about chance, therefore all the stuff they're going to say about eyeballs and eggs, those are wrong too. That's, of course, when we make up our own definition to make atheists look silly. Sure, great, wonderful. Now consider an even more egregious assertion. Consider the absurdity of boldly asserting that an eye, an egg, or the earth, shouldn't that be capitalized? Each in its vast complexity is merely a function of random chance. Ironically, Darwin himself found it hard to swallow the notion that the eye could be a byproduct of blind evolutionary chance, conceding that the intricacies of the human eye gave him cold shudders, quote unquote cold shudders. Now let's see what the footnotes are saying. So the eye, the egg, or the earth as just chance. Perhaps we should generously give evolutionists the benefit of the doubt at this point and assume that the reference to chance here is not as an ontological causal agency, referring to the notion of uncaused effects, but in the formal sense of mathematical probabilities, such as an already existent material in the universe through time and natural processes alone might manifest life through some discernible causal pathway. Of course, as we will see, life cannot be produced this way either. So I like how he's trying to generously give evolutionists the benefit of the doubt by using the correct definition of what they mean. Great. Thank you, Hank. Thank you for being so generous as to not use your made-up nonsense. Thank you. Wow, that's so big of you. And then for the idea about Darwin's eyeball, cold shudders, this comes from J.F. Copenhagen, Evolution, Possible or Impossible. So again, he could actually go to whatever Darwin's actually saying. He could look at his own writings, and instead he doesn't. He goes to somebody else. So nice. Can we check it out? So I tried finding this book if there was a PDF that we could read online, and there is not. However, I decided to just try to search for Darwin, evolution, eye, and then cold shudders, and the only thing that comes up are creationists. I think this must have just been something that came possibly from this particular book, that he misquoted or made up a citation or something, and then other creationists are just using it as if it's true, having never actually tracked down the original source that Coppage claimed this was coming from. I can't find anything about this actually being related to evolution, Darwinian evolution, Darwin, anything along those lines. They're just creationist websites. Thanks, Hank. Thanks. All right, so we're going to the eye. In his landmark publication, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, Darwin avowed, "To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd to the highest degree possible." And of course we have a source. Hopefully it's actually Darwin. So we have Charles Darwin, Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, as in Robert Maynard Hutchins' Great Books of the Western World, Volume 49, Darwin. Okay, so this actually comes from, it's produced by Encyclopedia Britannica, doesn't seem to be anything particularly creationist. Now, I've heard other atheists mention that the sentence after this is something like, but it seems that this really is the case, so I do want to check out what the full context is for this quote. Okay, we have darwinonline.org.uk, and we can just read the whole thing here. I'll go ahead and put a link in the details section below. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus, blah blah blah, I freely confess absurd in the highest possible degree. When it was first said that the sun stood still and the world turned round, the common sense of mankind declared the doctrine false. But the old saying of vox populi, vox Dei, as every philosopher knows, can never be trusted in science. Reason tells me that if numerous gradations from a perfect and complex eye to one very imperfect and simple, each grade being useful to its possessor, can be shown to exist. If further the eye does vary ever so slightly, and the variations be inherited, which it is certainly the case, and if any variation or modification in the organ be ever useful to an animal under changing conditions of life, then the difficulty of believing that the perfect and complex eye could be formed by natural, well, looks like it ends here. Next. By natural selection through insuperable by our imagination can hardly be considered real. How a nerve comes to be sensitive to light hardly concerns us more than how life itself first originated, but I may remark that several facts make me suspect that nerves sensitive to touch may be rendered sensitive to light, and likewise those coarser vibrations of the air which produce sound. And so on, it seems to go and explain just the progression of the eye. As we can see, yeah, it was totally just misrepresented. It's completely pulled out of context to make it seem like Darwin had doubts about evolution, that he had these, I think there was a phrase, Darwin's black box, this idea that Darwin just could not explain the eye, because here's this quote from him from his book. And then it looks like it wasn't something he came up with later. It looks like just continuing to read from that quote in the same book tells us exactly what Darwin suspected about the eye. Wow. Fantastic. This is worse than I thought. He just explains it step by step. I mean, he even gives us the analogy, this idea that suggesting to people of the past that the sun is stationary and the earth is what moves, as opposed to the earth being stationary and the sun is what moves across the sky. That would have been seen as ridiculous as well, but based off of what we were able to find, that is the case. Oh, Hank. He labeled this dilemma as the problem of, quote, organs of extreme perfection and complication. Is that what he said? Of course, Darwin's life work was intended to show all biological organisms with their attending organs of extreme perfection and complication were indeed formed through natural selection. Oh, well, so Hank even admits that Darwin didn't believe these are just magically created and we don't know how they came to be. Gordon Rattray Taylor points out the further mind-boggling complications. Consider that in evolutionary mythology, it is dogmatically asserted that snakes evolved from lizards, despite the fact that the visual cells of lizards have no similarity to those of snakes. In addition, the eye appears suddenly in natural history. Even in the earliest fishes have sophisticated eyes, and this comes from The Great Evolution Mystery from 1983. I would like for him to cite a source of evolutionary biology. I think we've shown enough times that when we look this up, he's just lying. He's lying, he's wrong, his source is wrong, one of those three. So honestly, I don't want to go look this up further. I just don't. You know what, we're gonna, for the sake of just being thorough and fair. Cool. This has to do with reptiles and basically just talking about the evolution of snake eyes, especially if you are interested in having snakes as pets. The structure of the snake eyes is particularly interesting due to its unique composition compared to all other vertebrates, even differing from its closest living relative, the lizards. The reason for the unique nature of the snake eyes may be linked to the structure of snake eyes is particularly interesting due to its unique composition compared to all other vertebrates, even differing from its closest living relatives, the lizards. The reason for the unique nature of snake eyes may be linked to the snake's evolutionary history. The lizard, or lizard-like ancestor of snakes, would have likely been nocturnal or a burrowing species that lived in an environment which did not require color vision, nor required especially good vision at all. In these ancestral fossorial species, the size of the eyes are thought to have been reduced, prompted by the low light conditions, and for the cones, which are only useful in daylight, to have regressed. Gordon Walls in the early 1940s suggested that after his extended fossorial phase, more modern snakes would have moved back to above-ground habitats. The photoreceptors that regressed during the fossorial phase were in effect rebuilt to accommodate the requirements of the species moving in a daytime lifestyle. And it goes on from there. I'll put the link in the details section below. But this is something that I just suspected, that since their divergence, we ended up with different eyes, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we have different eyes, right? Why wouldn't they continue to be affected by natural selection and evolution by chance? Why wouldn't they be affected by that after they've split from a common ancestor? It's so bizarre. Okay, Hank. Consider for a moment the incredible complexity of the human eye. It consists of a ball with a lens on one side and a light-sensitive retina made of rods and cones on the other. The lens itself has a sturdy protective covering called a cornea and sits over an iris designed to protect the eye from excessive light. The eye contains a fantastic watery substance that is replaced every 4 hours, while tear glands continuously flush the outside clean. In addition, an eyelid sweeps secretions over the cornea to keep it moist, and the eyelashes protect it from dust. I'm gonna add for this last one, if I were to design something, right, I wouldn't really necessarily care to do this. Why does it have to be wet? And why do we need the eyelashes to protect it from dust? Why don't we design an eye that's a bit sturdier? I have just longer eyelashes, and sometimes they will fall into my eye. And I get so frustrated because isn't the whole point of eyelashes to keep junk out of my eye? And here these eyelashes are falling into my eyes. It's very frustrating and very irritating, especially if I'm not anywhere near a mirror or if my hands are dirty and I can't start pulling at my eyes. And I just kind of wonder, why are my eyes so sensitive? Sometimes I will notice that one of my cats will get a little hair in its eye. The end. It's not clawing at its face, it's not blinking or winking at me, it just has something in its eye. So why is my eye so damn sensitive compared to my cat's eyes? How come cats can see way better at night than we can? Wouldn't it be useful for us to also be able to see at night? Or like the mantis shrimp, be able to see a bunch of different colors? Wouldn't that be cool too? Why do we have these eyes that aren't the best? I would also make the eye something that can adjust underwater so we can see really well underwater. After all, people use a lot of seafood, whether it's animals in the sea or plants in the sea, and that would be something that a creator god would know. Why do we have to have these protective goggles for diving so we could see underwater? Why not just let us see underwater? I would argue, if you're going to say that, oh, I can't see how this was made by evolution, which again, it's just a step-by-step process. It's like saying I can't see how anyone could climb Everest that's so tall, right? Well, it's just one foot in front of the other and just keep moving forward, take some breaks and keep on going. I would argue that the eye is a great way to say there isn't a all-intelligent creator. Maybe there is a creator, but he's definitely not all-intelligent. Why would he make so many different kinds of eyes? Why not just like one really good eye that works in low light, it works in lots of light, it works in wet environments, it works in dry environments. It's not overly sensitive, it's not going to get hurt if it gets damaged, it's harder to damage. Why not do that? That's kind of bizarre when you think about it, right? This idea that Hank is arguing that our eye is perfectly, intelligently, and wonderfully created, when in reality there's so many problems. Also, how come the eye is like the window to the migraines? When I have a migraine and I get any light in there, oh my goodness, it just makes it even worse. Why would a god create that setup? Why would a god create discs that are easy to damage? It just, none of this makes any sense. Let's see what it says for the footnote. See description adapted from G. Taylor again, and then number 10 is also going to be the same thing from G. Taylor. 11, we're going to get Coppage, and 12, oh, Michael Behe, Darwin's Black Box, there we go. Okay. Black box is Behe's term for a device that does something but whose inner workings remain mysterious. For the average person, computers are a good example of a black box. Well, it seems like evolution's a good example for a black box for creationists. And then 13, we're going to get the same Michael Behe's book. So for the next few sentences, we don't have to check this. It's just, hey, here's the book I got it from. It's a creationist book. It is one thing to stretch credulity by suggesting that the complexities of the eye evolved by chance. It is quite another to surmise that the eye could have evolved in concert with a myriad of other coordinated functions. As a case in point, extraordinarily tuned muscles around the eye for precision motility and the shaped lens for the function of focus. So again, we know it's a step-by-step process. I'm just going to say that I've actually eaten the eye muscles of tuna. One of my favorite things that I will go and get for my birthday, like a birthday lunch or birthday dinner if I have the opportunity, is tuna head or tuna face. It's so good. There's so many different tastes and textures that are found in this tuna's face. It's really interesting. So I would say if we want to explore these interesting, finely tuned muscles, you can do that through food, I should probably reopen. These are old, they're old videos, but it was the first time I got to try tuna face and I just really enjoyed it. I should probably go reopen those, and I'll put some links as well so you guys can check them out. But since we are talking about the eye, the way that it's prepared, at least in Korea, is they will freeze the eye and then they'll shave this sclera ice basically into a shot of soju, and then you shoot it, and it's really good. If you prepare it in advance, which I've also had, I don't recommend that. It gets kind of goopy. It really changes the texture. The flavor, it's fine, but the texture I'm not a fan of. If you do it and then take the shot right away, there's no change in texture. It's just a cold shot of liquor. However, there's some fatty quality that kind of comes out from the sclera, and it takes away that bite of liquor. It's just really good. So big fan. And then once you eat all the fleshy pieces of it raw, then the chef will actually roast the rest of the face. And so all of the other collagen and connective tissues and stuff, it just kind of collapses into this gelatinous deliciousness with this amazing sauce. It's so good. So thank you, Hank, for at least reminding me of delicious tuna. Also, favorite sushi, monkfish liver. Oh, it's so good. I gotta post the thing I did in Japan. I need to catch up on some of my videos. Ugh. Additionally, consider the fact that as you read this document, a vast number of impulses are traveling from your eyes through millions of nerve fibers that transmit information to a complex computing center in the brain called the visual cortex. You know what? I've got a number of other impulses as well that's traveling to my fists when I read this, Hank. Linking the visual information from the eyes to the motor centers in the brain is crucial in coordinating a vast number of bodily functions that are axiomatic to the very process of daily living. Without the coordinated development of the eye and the brain in a synergistic fashion, the isolated developments themselves become meaningless and counterproductive. This is sort of sounding like when somebody tries to make their job sound much more complicated and valuable than it is. Now, yes, of course, this is all linked together, but the whole purpose of Hank going through how complex of a process this is, it's to make the reader go, wow, there's no way that this could have possibly evolved step by step in a random chance kind of way. Wow, it must have been created by God. Just ignoring the fact that there are people that don't have the coordinated vast bodily functions, like people living with cerebral palsy. In Darwin's Black Box, biochemist Michael Behe points out that what happens when a photon of light hits a human eye was beyond 19th century science. Thus, to Darwin, vision was an unopened black box. So again, this is just them coining it that way, as if Darwin had no idea of what was going on, which we read, he definitely had a lot of ideas, right? He understood that at least it's related to nerves, and those are related to the brain, and so on. I don't know, Michael Behe, come on. In the 20th century, however, the black box of vision has been opened, and it is no longer enough to consider the anatomical structure of the eye. We now know that each of the anatomical steps and structures that Darwin thought were so simple actually involves staggeringly complicated biochemical processes, that's a quote, that demand explanation. Where does this quote come from? I'm assuming this quote comes from Michael Behe. Also, it looks like they're going to be explaining something that is really interesting for me to have to explain to my AP Psych students. They're always surprised that AP Psych starts off with, hey, let's learn about the brain and how the brain works and how vision works and sound and all of these other senses, and how the brain does stuff like turning taste into an electrical signal that it can interpret. And so it is kind of interesting that the color, texture, distance, and movement, which I think this is what it's pointing out here, all of these are different. So there's a figure on the screen if you're not looking at the screen, and it just shows, hey, the eye breaks things down in a different way, the brain breaks things down in a different way. Let's see what this footnote is. All right, it's the same one, so I guess I forgot that we're going through 13. So the explanation on the figure is linking information from the eyes to the motor centers of the brain is crucial in coordinating bodily functions axiomatic to the process of daily living. So you just said that again? Okay. Why not just put in where he wrote that first, see figure 3.1 or 4.1, I think we're on chapter 4, see figure 4.1. Why did he have to rewrite it? That's bizarre. Behe goes on to demonstrate that one cannot explain the origin of vision without first accounting for the origin of the enormously complex system of molecular mechanisms that make it work. The complexity of the biochemistry of vision is such that I've relegated further details to a note. Okay, let's check out the note. Well, why did you relegate it to a note. If it's so important and you... Okay, whatever. When light first strikes the retina, a photon interacts with a molecule called 11-cis-retinol, which rearranges within picoseconds to a transretinal. A picosecond is about the time it takes light to travel a breadth of a single human hair. The change in shape in the retinal, da-da-da-da. Okay, so it's just saying, look at this, it's complicated. All right. Oh, I see, this is why he's putting it here. You see, this is the thing. I make a comment, maybe I have an initial feeling about it. Why is he writing it here? Why isn't he just putting it in the rest of his writing? And then I go through and I check it out. I think that's where Hank kind of messes up. He thinks because he has a question, that's where he gets to end. He just gets to question it, and then he doesn't try to actually find anything beyond that. All right, so cool. So again, wow, the eye is complicated. Okay, so what? Philip Johnson, author of Defeating Darwinism by Opening Minds, has aptly summarized Darwin's dilemma regarding the eye. Quote, evolutionary biologists have been able to pretend to know how complex biological systems originated only because they treated them as black boxes. Now that biochemists have opened the black boxes and seen what's inside, they know the Darwinian theory is just a story, not a scientific explanation. Well, that just doesn't make any sense. Hey, now that we know more about the thing, we don't know anything. That's so ridiculous, right? If we know more specifics, then we know what to look for in the past. This is just stupid. This is just so stupid. That's like saying, wow, this cookie tastes really good. I don't know what goes into this cookie, but then being able to analyze the cookie with some kind of machine to let us know exactly what's inside the cookie, then we don't know anything beyond that. Then we have to say, oh gosh, this cookie was just made out of magic. No, not only do we now know the ingredients in the cookie, we can find out where those ingredients could be sourced from, and then further find out where those ingredients first originated. Where did sugarcane first originate? We can now find out as it's related to how this cookie ended up getting sugar in it. Is it refined white sugar? Is it brown sugar? Is it some other type of sugar? We can check that out too. So the idea that because we've been able to learn more, we've had to say we've learned nothing and can't figure anything out, that's absurd. That's so stupid. And it just says, here's the book again from the page. That's the quote. The next of these, I'm just trying to see. All right, so we can get until 26, and that's when there's actual information being given. Otherwise, it's just, hey, these are the guys I'm quoting, or these are the guys I got it from. All right, so we have something about birds. We have something about an eggshell, but this is from Copenhagen, sorry, citing another person. Okay, good. The Reader's Digest isn't cited anywhere. The wonders of God's creation. The natural sciences know nothing of evolution. And then the origin of life from Eden Publishing. Wonderful. So we have one non-creationist source and another non-creationist source that looks like it's a scientific source. It says Scientific American. However, it's being cited by Coppage. Also notice that it's being cited by Coppage from 1970. So that is a little bit interesting. When's that Coppage book written? 1993. So that's kind of interesting. It's written in 1993, but he's got to go back 23 years to cite something. Gosh, I wonder if anything about the eye could have been discovered in those 23 years. I wonder why they're picking it from such a distant source in the past. Egg. In Darwin's black box, Behe further notes that there are black boxes within black boxes. As science advances, more and more of these black boxes are being opened, revealing an, quote, unanticipated Lilliputian world, end quote, of enormous complexity that has pushed the theory of evolution beyond the breaking point. So again, he's just saying because we're learning, we're somehow overwhelmed with what we're learning, and we just throw our hands up and say, golly, none of this makes sense, as opposed to we're finding more puzzle pieces to complete the picture. Evolution cannot account for the astonishingly complex synchronization process needed for, say, the shell of an emerging egg to form the calcium that is stored inside the bones of a bird's body. This shell not only provides a protective covering for the egg, but also provides a source of calcium for the emerging embryo and a membrane through which it can breathe. Furthermore, evolution cannot account for the complex synchronization process needed to produce life from a single fertilized human egg. So again, the wonders of human creation. And for some reason, even though we're talking about a lot of bird egg stuff, here's a human egg sketch. And then it says, through the process of incredible precision, a microscopic egg in one human is fertilized by sperm cell from another. Great. So tell me why there were so many miscarriages. It's just so perfect, right? The tapestry of life begins within a single thread. Through a process of incredible precision, a microscopic egg and one human is fertilized by the sperm cell from another. This process not only marks the beginning of a new life, but the genetic future of that life. Now, we're getting so close, Hank. Do you think that the child, any of your, 12 kids, do you think that they are genetic copies of you or your wife? Are there any variations in your kids? Single fertilized egg, the size of a pinhead, contains chemical instructions that would fill more than 500,000 printed pages. We heard the same argument from Frank and Norm, because information is equivalent to writing things down in an encyclopedia, right? The genetic information contained in this encyclopedia determines the potential physical aspect of the developing human, from height to hair color, in the time the fertilized egg divides into 30 trillion cells, blah, blah, blah. Again, wow, isn't this complex? In Darwin's day, a human egg was thought to be quite simple. For all practical purposes, little more than a microscopic blob of gelatin. What do you mean for all practical purposes? There's no possible way they thought that it was just a piece of gelatin. You could just test that. You could put sperm into a blob of gelatin and watch it grow into an embryo. Today, we know that a fertilized egg is among the most organized, complex structures in the universe. In an age of scientific enlightenment, it is incredible to think that people are willing to maintain that something so vastly complex arose by chance. So again, this is all just saying, oh, it's so complicated, there's no way it could have possibly happened. Let's think about an earthquake. Let's think about all the damage that an earthquake causes. If we break down that damage and we just talk about it as a specific individual thing, that there was this much movement of exactly this many meters, and this many buildings exactly were completely destroyed, while this many buildings exactly were partially destroyed, and this many buildings exactly were not really destroyed at all. This is the amount of people exactly that died, and this is the amount of people exactly who were just injured, and this is the amount of people exactly who were just okay. Wow, it's so complex, this couldn't have happened by chance. The only reason that he's so amazed by this kind of chance is because he's a human. So this chance of humans seems really amazing and intentional because it created me, and it created you, and it created all of our humans. In reality, I guess we can even think about humans being as destructive as other natural forces. I mean, think of all the damage that we've done to the planet, to other animals, and to ourselves. So just because we specifically explain how that damage came to be, that makes it intentional? That makes it created by a higher being? It's a bit bizarre. As Dr. James Coppage, an expert in the science of statistical probability, puts it, chance requires 10 billion tries on the average in order to count to 10. Okay, so what? The universe is old. So what? I mean, ignoring the fact that he's only citing somebody who just agrees with him, he didn't go find another person in the science of statistical probability. But ignoring that, so what? So what if it includes a lot of tries? So what? We still counted to 10, didn't we? So even the guy that he's citing to show how it's impossible, the quote shows how it's possible. Bizarre. In an experiment using 10 similar coins numbered 1 through 10, chance will succeed on the average only once in 10 billion attempts to get the number 1 followed in order by all the rest. Coppage explains that if a person could draw and record 1 coin every 5 seconds day and night, it would still take more than 1,500 years for chance, on average, to succeed just once in counting to 10. Also notice he's saying on average, because it's chance, you could just do it the first time, right? You could get it on the 3rd try because it's chance. So this idea that, it requires 10 billion tries on the average also means it could require 50 billion tries, and it could require 1 try. This is where I keep running out of brain power trying to articulate how stupid this is. This is a whole adult who sat down, put his fingers to a keyboard, and just vomited. I mean, that's really what this is. That's it. It's so... He goes on to demonstrate the difference intelligence makes by documenting that to a child can do in minutes what chance would take a millennium to do. Okay, so what? Yeah, it's easier for something with a level of intelligence and a goal. It's easier for it to reach that goal. So what? That doesn't mean that chance can't produce it. You're even offering that chance can produce it, and that it can produce it in one go. Does he realize what he's even saying? This is a terrible, terrible argument. Chance really doesn't have a chance when compared to the intelligent purpose of even a child. You know what? I think a child's explanation of evolution is better than anything Hank produced. Even more revealing is the fact that a child playing the party game Scrabble can easily spell the phrase, "the theory of evolution," while Chance requires 5 million times the assumed age of the Earth to accomplish the same feat. Ma 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 ma. Again, no. Even Hank says so. There's a reason he kept putting "on the average." Coppage explains the problem of trying to produce such a phrase by chance. The phrase, "the theory of evolution," contains 23 ordered letters, so he's just explaining how we got to the number in 26 a bajillion years. Okay, so again, this is assuming that we end up with this is sort of like the number of possible iterations. I think they're confusing that, aren't they? The number of possible iterations of what can happen versus it's going to happen the first or second or fifth time that I do this. And I think that's where they're kind of messing it up. So he mentions that for the first T in our phrase, there's a 1 in 27 chance of drawing it. And that means that, yeah, there's a 1 in 27 chance of drawing it. There's 26 other options, and there's a 27th one that I'm looking for, which is T, and I could pull that the first time. I could pull that the second time. They're ignoring this of what this chance actually is because they're trying to show these are the number of possible combinations. So it could take up to this long to do it. That doesn't mean it must take this long to do it. Is Coppage poorly explaining this? I don't know. I mean, this is Hank explaining what Coppage explained, and we know that Hank doesn't understand things very well anyway. Is Hank just not understanding it, or is Coppage, this guy who is apparently an expert in statistical probability, just really bad at explaining it? Or is he deliberately explaining it poorly to make his case for creationism sound better? Oh, there's more. If chance is so unproductive at producing such a simple phrase as the theory of evolution, it is just inconceivable to think that chance could have produced something as organized and complex as a single cell, let alone the unfathomable organized complexity of the human brain. Well, there's the other problem, right? It's this idea that we want to produce a phrase, the theory of evolution. And this is why it's going to take us so many frustrating times of try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. That's not how evolution works. It works with, did this next step produce anything useful? If so, let's use it. And it slowly builds something that can be used. I would say it might be closer to taking something and trying to consistently repair or improve it using duct tape, soldering, other tools. And then you end up with something at the end that's still functional, but it's nothing that you could have predicted you were going to create. You didn't know that this thing would cause a problem in this way, so you have to compensate for it by building a supporting structure, right? And then now this is really cool, but oh no, maybe the climate is becoming colder, so now we have to accommodate for it by adding another structure. And so you end up with this response to whatever's happening, a response to the new structure somehow being unstable over time, or a response to outside forces, something that we can't change and now we have to deal with. And you end up with something that you never could have predicted. So this idea that, well, we're trying to get to this specific phrase or a bunch of numbers in a specific sequence, this is going to be really difficult for us to get there. Therefore, evolution is wrong because chance isn't going to allow for this. That's a completely incorrect way to approach this, isn't it? Isn't it? Again, is he doing this on purpose? What do you think? Is he doing this on purpose? Or is he just this bad at what he does? Is he a liar or a fool? That's kind of where we're left. Is Hank stupid or is he lying? He can't have had this conversation this many times and had nobody correct him on it, right? Or just it never dawned on him, the amount of times he's had this conversation that, oh, wait a minute, you know what, I'm actually approaching this the wrong way. This never occurred to him, nobody ever brought this up, or did it occur to him and or somebody brought this up and he's just putting his fingers in his ears and pretending that nobody said anything so he can just keep being Christian? If Hank comes to accept that evolution is true, that shouldn't affect his faith. It really shouldn't. We talked about this in the other videos, that this isn't anything that is going to rip your faith apart. There's a lot of different ways to interpret the Bible. I mean, it's for Hank, it's not that He's making it a big deal, but honey, it's not that big of a deal. Earth. Like an egg or an eye. All right, so we know Earth. Okay. Are we gonna, let's see, I'm gonna make a guess about what he's gonna talk about. He's gonna talk about the distance from the sun. He's gonna talk about the elliptical orbit that gives us 4 seasons unless you live in like a tropical area at sea level. And he's gonna talk about water. I think he's gonna talk about water. That when water freezes, it floats, and that's a big deal. Otherwise, it would sink to the bottom of the ocean, and that would be a big problem. I think those are the things he's going to bring up as Earth being super complex. Oh, maybe the moon. Something about the moon and an eclipse. Those are my guesses. What are your guesses? Go ahead and pause and type your guesses. Astronaut Guy Gardner, or Guy Gardner, who has seen the Earth from the perspective of the moon, points out, quote, "The more we learn and see about our universe, the more we come to realize that the most ideally suited place for life within the entire solar system is the planet we call home." Okay? I mean, yeah, based on other places in the solar system, the Earth is pretty good for the things that evolved on Earth, right? Okay, so this specifically comes from The Wonders of God's Creation, Planet Earth, Volume 1, from the Moody Institute of Science. So that's why they're including it, as if we're supposed to be really impressed that the place where life has evolved is the best place for that life to stay. Wow, fantastic. King David said it best. "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world," which of course is this idea that if we look up, look at the trees, basically. Let's take a few minutes to explore the miracles that demonstrate life on Earth was designed by a benevolent creator rather than directed by blind chance. Okay, first of all, go ahead and just, again, type all the things on Earth that you think are not good for human life. I'm going to say most of the water that we can access is water we cannot drink. So that's a big one for me. And a lot of places on Earth we can't live unless we heavily modify it. And then also just us, the creations. Again, bad discs, bad eyes. First, consider plain old tap water. The solid state, there we go. A solid state of most substances is more dense than their liquid state, but the opposite is true for water, which explains why ice floats rather than sinks. If water were like virtually any other liquid, it would freeze from the bottom up rather than from the top down, killing aquatic life, destroying the oxygen supply, and making Earth uninhabitable. Yeah, but then it waters down my whiskey. So, obviously not benevolent. Let's check out the footnote. Okay, so the next footnote, this one and the one after it, and the number 30, these are all from the Wonders of God's Creation videotape. Furthermore, ocean tides, which are caused by the gravitational pull of the moon, dang it, I mentioned the moon, but not the tides, play a crucial role in our survival. If the moon were significantly larger, thereby having a stronger gravitational pull, devastating tidal waves would submerge large areas of land. If the moon were smaller, tidal motion would cease, and the oceans would stagnate and die. But again, we would just be different, because it's saying the oceans would stagnate and die if the moon were smaller right this second, with all of the life that's already here. The idea behind this is that the life would have evolved differently based on the available tide. How does he not understand this? And we get a picture of the Earth as seen from the moon. The photo, released by NASA December 29th, 1968, shows the spectacular Earthrise which greeted Apollo 8 astronauts. Finally, consider the ideal temperatures on planet Earth, not duplicated on any other known planet in the universe, which I think we would argue now, because of the amount of exoplanets that we found that are pretty similar to Earth. If we were closer to the sun, we would fry. If we were farther away, we would freeze. But again, that's for us. That's if we pushed the Earth closer or further, right? If it was already closer or further, we would have just evolved differently. How does he not get this? So Scott M. Hughes, The Collapse of Evolution. Hughes lists a number of additional demonstrations of design, including 1, any appreciable change in the rate of rotation would have made life impossible. Burned to a crisp, frozen in night. Earth's axis tilted. Earth's atmosphere, ozone layer. 2 primary constituent of Earth's atmosphere are nitrogen and oxygen. Delicate and critical ratio is essential to life in all forms. Earth's magnetic field. All right, cool. So they listed a bunch of stuff that I didn't think to list. However, again, so what? If those things were starting off with Earth, then we would have just evolved differently. That's it. That's it. From tap water to tides and temperatures that we so easily take for granted, the Earth is an unparalleled planetary masterpiece. Like Handel's Messiah or Da Vinci's Last Supper, it should never be carelessly pawned off as the result of blind evolutionary processes. Why not? Yet, tragically, in the age of scientific enlightenment, wait, this isn't evolution. Are they doing the cosmic evolution thing? Anyway, in the age of scientific enlightenment, many are doing just that. Consider the following introduction to The Miracle of Life, an Emmy Award-winning PBS Nova broadcast on evolution. Starting a block quote, 4.5 billion years ago, the young planet Earth was a mass of cosmic dust and particles. It was almost completely engulfed by the shallow primordial seas. Powerful winds gathered random molecules from the atmosphere. Some were deposited in the seas. Tides and currents swept the molecules together. And somewhere in this ancient ocean, the miracle of life began. The first organized form of primitive life was a tiny protozoan, a one-celled animal. Millions of protozoa populated the ancient seas. These early organisms were completely self-sufficient in their seawater world. They moved about their aquatic environment, feeding off of bacteria and other organisms. From these one-celled organisms evolved all life on Earth. Let's check out the footnote. And this is from Nova. The next footnote is from Denton. The next footnote is from Denton. And the footnote after that is from Coppage. And we'll read that when we get there. The real miracle of life is how someone could stand for such nonsense in the 20th century. Ha ha ha! Good one, Hank. First, how could the protozoa be the first form of primitive life if there were already organisms such as bacteria in existence? Maybe they meant that we didn't evolve from bacteria. Maybe that's what they meant. I don't know. I didn't hear it. And you're also cutting out other sections. There's 2 sections where Hank cuts out the introduction, so we don't know. We don't know if he just fell asleep or if he just decided this isn't going to suit my narrative. Molecular biology has demonstrated empirically that bacteria are incredibly complex. In the words of Michael Denton, who cares? But we'll read them anyway. Although the tiniest bacterial cells are incredibly small, weighing less than 10 to 12 grams, each is, in effect, a veritable micro-miniaturized factory containing thousands of exquisitely designed pieces of intricate molecular machinery made up altogether of 100,000 million atoms, far more complicated than any machine built by man and absolutely without parallel in the non-living world. So again, it's complicated. It couldn't have evolved. They also use a lot of built terms like factory or machinery, these terms that require engineering so we can make it feel engineered. Furthermore, far from being primitive, the protozoa that were thought to be simple in Darwin's day have been shown by science to be enormously complex. Again, who cares? Molecular biology has demonstrated that there is no such thing as a primitive cell. Well, primitive would just be like the first one. To quote Denton again, why? Well, we know why. In terms of their basic biochemical design, no living system can be thought of as being primitive or ancestral with respect to any other system, nor is there the slightest empirical hint of an evolutionary sequence among all the incredibly diverse cells on Earth. But why would we care what Denton says? Do you know what I mean? Find somebody who's an evolutionist, quote unquote, and see what they have to say. If they're going to start agreeing with you, now we're on to something. But wow, I found a creationist who agrees with me. So what? So what? I should call this book So What? Finally, as Coppage documents, giving evolutionists every possible concession, postulating a primordial sea with every single component necessary and speeding up the rate of bonding trillion times, and then it's all just chance. The probability of a single protein being arranged and blah, 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 blah. So again, this is with the idea that we're trying to create a specific protein. This is how many times it would take to attempt that randomly. But that's not what evolutionists, quote unquote, are saying happened. They really are just making money off of not knowing at all what they're talking about. I mean, cool. So if we jump down to see what this footnote says. Okay, so it's just about Coppage saying it's tiny, there's amino acids, it's a lot, and again, based on what we already have, how long would it take us to get there to make this specific thing is not the same as those things came together in a way that functions. That's just really not the same thing. I think that would be like saying that God created each language, because the idea of one language coming from another and evolving so differently, that is such a bizarre concept because it can't do that. Look at how perfectly the language works. Look at all the grammatical structures of the language. Look at how all the letters mean something, or all the characters have a meaning. And that sometimes they have other meanings and subtle meanings, and they can have all this different ideas being conveyed in the written language or in the spoken language just by saying a single sentence. To create English by chance would be random and etc. probability super 28 million bajillion. Therefore, God himself created English. That's really what he's saying. That's really what he's saying. And what the evolutionists, quote unquote, are saying are the language evolved and it functions. Nobody set out to create what we know as modern English. To provide a perspective on how enormous a 1 followed by 161 zeros is, Coppage uses the illustration of an amoeba, a microscopic one-celled animal, moving through the entire universe, including every person, the Earth, the solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, millions of other galaxies, etc., over the width of one universe, atom by atom. The amoeba is going to move the entire universe over one universe. The universe is 30 billion light years in diameter. To calculate the number of miles, multiply 30 billion by 5.9 trillion. At the slowest possible speed, the amoeba is going to move 1 angstrom unit, the width of a hydrogen atom, the smallest known atom, every 15 billion years, the supposed age of the universe. Obviously, the amoeba would have to move zillions of times before the naked eye could detect that it had moved at all. Okay, I mean, this doesn't matter because nobody's saying that each individual atom has come together to create specifically the amoeba. They're not saying that. They're saying that these things interacted and it happened to result in an amoeba, and that happened to do other things. That's it. I think the earthquake idea is making more and more sense. At this rate, the amoeba will travel. You know what? Who cares? I'm not going to read how fast it's going to travel. In the time it took to do all that, we would not get remotely close to forming one protein molecule by random chance. And then there's a footnote. Discussion adapted from Coppage. George Bernard Shaw used a similar argument to demonstrate. So wait, Shaw used an example that Coppage kind of hijacked, and then Hank hijacked that. Okay. So I really think the comment about Hank just, that comment from Shane about Hank just basically plagiarizing everybody else and stitching it all together and selling it as this book, that's really coming to mind. Imagine if a million monkeys writing on a million typewriters 24 hours a day attempting to pound out a Shakespearean play, blah, 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 blah. Again, nobody's trying to make a Shakespearean play. Nobody's trying to do that. Evolutionists sometimes make the accusation that this type of argumentation does not correctly represent the evolutionary paradigm. Okay, is Hank going to address it? The more sophisticated admit that the notion of chance alone is responsible for life is at best far-fetched. They suggest rather than chance acting unilaterally, the natural selection or some other unintelligent, non-random mechanism was involved in the process. Perhaps beneficial molecular changes are accumulated over time while natural selection weeds out the harmful mutations. That's fine. I've heard that as well. The sort of poker analogy where you build a hand by giving up 2 of the cards, for example. You're not asking for a new set of 5 cards every time and then wondering why it's so difficult to get to something like a straight or a royal flush. So instead, you start out with a set of cards, you give up the ones that are useless to you, and you try again. And you can keep doing that, and then it's much easier to get to a royal flush doing that instead of just recycling all 5 cards every time. So that's what they're saying here. I've heard of that. That's not the argument I'm making. Let's see if Hank touches on the argument I'm making. It should be noted there is no evidence that suggests information in the genetic code is or can be increased by this manner. What do you mean? What do you mean? How is he saying this? There's no evidence to suggest a beneficial mutation is beneficial and stays in the DNA? What? Nor are there any known physical laws that can be involved to account for the extremely high information content of genetic material. What? He thinks there has to be a physical law that explains why DNA has instructions? What? This is... Somebody tell me, what is this argument? This is ridiculous. This is as ridiculous, and I've heard this from again, niche evangelicals. It might be nitpicking, but this is the type of Christian Hank is. So I've heard it from this type of Christian. If scientists are so smart, how come they're dead? God is so amazing, and that's why he's immortal. God is immortal, therefore he's amazing. I can't even try to explain the thought process of that argument. I've never made that argument when I was a Christian, and I've only heard that argument towards me as an atheist. So this is nothing I ever encountered in the church, to my recollection. This idea that if scientists are so smart, how come they die? It's a bizarre argument. I just ask, why wouldn't they die? They're human. Why wouldn't they die? And you can't get anywhere. It's just basically eternal life, God, if you want eternal life, so you don't ever die, your soul never dies, you have to believe in God to go to heaven. And none of this is connected. So this idea that we have to have a physical law to explain why DNA happens to have more information than, I don't know, a mineral, that's so bizarre. That's bizarre. What is this? A non sequitur? What is it? Furthermore, it is simply a logical fallacy, which one? To say that an accumulation of beneficial changes will produce an improved overall design. What? An accumulation of beneficial changes producing an improved overall design is a logical fallacy. How? We're making it better. That's like saying your rough draft, your outline to a rough draft, to a first draft, to a second draft, to a final draft, that the final draft is not better than the outline, that it's a logical fallacy that the final draft would end up better if we're making positive beneficial changes. So we're not making stupid changes just randomly and deleting a bunch of stuff and just retrying and whatever. We're making good changes based off of things like, I don't know, grammatical patterns and improving the amount of, and adding more sources that support the argument, whatever. So we're making beneficial changes to each consequent draft until we get to the final draft. He's saying that doesn't happen. It's a logical fallacy to assume that happens. What? And he doesn't explain it. He doesn't explain why it's a logical fallacy. I regret painting a smile on my face because I am decidedly unhappy with this. Finally, those capable of scaling the evolutionary language barrier realize that this is little more than using the phrase natural selection while pouring the meaning of intelligent design into these words. So they're accusing essentially God of the gaps, but through natural selection and intelligent design. Okay, so are you saying that God designed different climates to happen so some animals have more fur in the winter? Is that what he thinks? I mean, that is a man wholly unable to just pause his current beliefs to try to see the other side. If he thinks that everything said by people who do not believe in God is just code word mismatch for actually it is God, there's something wrong with you, Hank. There's something wrong. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe he's not stupid, and maybe he's not lying. Maybe there's something wrong with him. This is the best you got, huh? This is it. If, however, a protein molecule is eventually formed by chance, forming the second one would be infinitely more difficult. As you can see, the science of statistical probability demonstrates conclusively that forming a protein molecule by random processes is not only improbable, it is impossible. No, it just said improbable. It doesn't say impossible, number one. Number two, this is wrong for the reasons that I mentioned. And forming a living cell is beyond illustration. As King David poignantly put it, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Okay. All right. I mean, great. Remember, this is supposed to be an argument against evolution because of reasons, but let's go ahead and just say you're stupid for being atheist. Okay. That's a good argument against evolution. Remember, that's the point of the book, is to point out how evolution is wrong. So let's quote from King David, the fool in his heart says there is no God. If I saw a student do something similar, I would highlight it in red and make my markings on the document saying, This is not related to your point. Please remove it. We now move to the letter E in the acronym FACE, which represents empirical science. As you proceed, you will be equipped to demonstrate that the basic laws of science undermine the theory of evolution and undergird the fact of creation. Didn't we mention this too in the comments reading? This idea that they will accept science when it agrees with them, but they will throw it away when they don't like it. So again, I'm prophetic. Can't argue that, can we? And so, this ending part from Richard Dawkins: if all the achievements of theologians were wiped out tomorrow, would anyone notice the smallest difference? Even the bad achievements of scientists work. The achievements of theologians don't do anything, don't affect anything, don't mean anything. What makes anyone think that theology is a subject at all? Okay, well, I disagree. The idea about theologians accomplishing or achieving something, because if he's willing to say the bad achievements of scientists work, well, the bad achievements of theologians impact people's lives. So I would say that we would notice, and it would be good if we got rid of all the achievements of theologians. So I disagree with Dawkins here. And I'm allowed to do that because, unlike what Hank thinks, atheists are not some monolith and Dawkins is not our prophet. I find it as difficult to understand a scientist who does not acknowledge the presence of a superior rationality behind the existence of the universe as it is to comprehend a theologian who would deny the advances of science. And there is certainly no scientific reason why God cannot retain the same relevance in our modern world that we held. And there is certainly no scientific reason why God cannot retain the same relevance in our modern world that he held before we began probing his creation with telescope, cyclotron, and space vehicles. Our survival here and hereafter depends on adherence to ethical and spiritual values. And you know what? We're not even going to need to talk about his contributions to the Nazis or the idea of a Nazi part of the SS talking about adherence to ethical values, because we don't have to. And the reason for this is that there is certainly no scientific reason why God cannot retain his same relevance in our modern world. I agree. However, in our modern world, we see that we can actually test stuff, and we don't just need to listen to what somebody else says about other things. And as we keep finding out that a lot of ideas that humans had are actually incorrect. Different ideas we had about the world are incorrect. And then we've been able to correct them, which has resulted in a net benefit. And that science has benefited us in general. This idea about God, however, what has that given to humanity? To kind of go towards more the Dawkins idea, what benefit has that given to humanity? Now, while there's certainly no scientific reason why God cannot be relevant, we have to first figure out if God even exists. I don't know about you, but this is probably the worst chapter so far for me. This was just bad. And at the end here, I guess it was about amoebas and proteins, but remember, this section was supposed to be about Earth. And we started off a little bit with tides and temperatures, but then we went right into evolution. I thought the whole point was just to talk about Earth and Earth being special, but he just jumped into evolution anyway. All right. I don't know if he really understands what he's talking about. And yeah, we're kind of ending up with, at least we got a third option. Instead of Hank being ignorant or... well, I can't say ignorant, I have to say stupid. It's been presented to him. So instead of him being stupid or lying, we've ended up with a third option. Maybe there's just something wrong with him. So I guess we'll see. That being said, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If you made it this far, let me know by putting a monkey and a lemon emoji in the comment section below if you would. If you want to go ahead and join us on the Discord, there's a link to that in the details section below. You can also just join the cult for as little as $1 a month. You can either do that here on YouTube as a YouTube member, or you can do it on Patreon. Your membership will get you early access to all my videos, some videos and updates that are just for you guys. And once a month, we also have our cult meetings, which are live streams for cult members only. They last about 3 to 4 hours, and we talk about different things like religion, cults, and stuff that's sort of adjacent to that, things like flat earth or some other beliefs like ghosts or that sort of thing. I don't know. I have fun with it. The members have fun with it. It's a good time. Go ahead and join us. With all that being said, as always, thanks for listening.
Train up a child in the way they should go. and they shan't depart from it. Spare the rod, spoil the child's what we're told. They want to justify being his. Children must obey their parents in all things, for this pleases the Lord. But is that all I can expect from my life? Comes in submission till I'm floored. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me and race all back the road. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken, they sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. Among his names, why is one of them jealous? What does that even mean? Why require our worship anyway? Why does he need anything? He is the potter and we are the clay. He does what he wills. If man is not, what could we even do? It's his choice to save or kill. Why create this buster system? Where's all the alleged wisdom? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me and race all that build. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken, they sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. What if I'm a doubting Thomas? Why refuse to reach out to us? If we are to seek the Lord, why does he hide of his own accord? Why give us brains to reason, but using them is highest treason?